Welcome to the Simply His Coffee Shop. I am so excited for today's program. We have extremely special guests today, and they have been on the show before once previously, but I'm so excited to have them back. My parents are in studio with us today, Ray and Becky Sparre. I'm so happy to have them back again to talk about their lives as missionaries and how that impacted them and what ministry looked like for them, because as a missionary that can look like all kinds of different things. And they worked primarily church planting, and then they also worked in Bible schools and training indigenous pastors to go out and spread the gospel in their own language and their own customs and everything like that. So take us back to when you guys started all of that to a degree.
Wow. It's a big story.
Yes, it is.
And boy, I don't know how much we can squeeze into this little short time here, but it has definitely been an adventure. I don't know what's the matter with me, but I think I've been wired for adventure as a little kid, and man, have I ever had my fill.
Yes,
but it's been fun, not just to be involved in the mission in the biblical evangelistic side of things, but it's been fun to be virtually, shall we say, a cultural anthropologist and embrace the different cultures that are represented in the Pacific Islands. We've had the privilege of serving in 4 island areas. Firstly was the Marshall Islands.
Yep.
And I just talked a little bit of Marshallese with one of my colleagues from that era this morning. But then we went to the Solomon Islands.
Yep.
And you talk about culture diversity. I mean, when you have approximately 200 tribal languages represented in that one country alone, it's there's a lot of diversity there.
Yes, there is.
And it's interesting, too, the language side of things. Well, maybe I'll just go a little ahead and say we were also in Vanuatu, also part of the South Pacific, Melanesia.
Yeah.
And the thing that's kind of unique language-wise in Melanesia is that there's a funny form of English that's kind of evolved out of what was typically the Australian version of the slave trade,
Right.
where people from diverse language groups are conscripted to work on Australian plantations.
Right.
So it's a funny form of English that's developed from that experience. Pidgin English is what it's called. And so actually in those 3 Melanesian countries, each one has their own
version of it.
Version of Pidgin English, and yet they're similar enough that we can communicate one with the other. So,
and then we were also in Micronesia.
Yeah.
For a little while.
Yeah, we were in let's see, from the Solomon Islands, we went back to Micronesia.
Yeah.
In the islands surrounding Ponape.
Yeah.
And then it was back to Melanesia again, to Vanuatu.
Yeah.
Formerly named the New Hebrides.
Yeah.
And it's derived a new modern name, I guess. Vanuatu is where we were served last.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much of our story to compress into this time, but while we were finishing up our term in Vanuatu, we had the unbecoming experience of a phone call from our oldest daughter there, informing us that our 2 sons were involved in a major motorbike crash in the mountains of Colorado.
Yes.
Our youngest son was brain injured in that incident and needing a lot of care and help. We laid aside our mission hats and with our youngest son being kind of the focus of that transfer, that change. Anyway, the adventure goes on. It doesn't stop. And we're still involved in adventure. And I guess maybe it's more fun to view it that way than to just view it as a bunch of difficult drudgery, you know.
Right.
But I will insert here that thankfully our son, when you say head injury, you think, oh, brother, incapacitated,
Right.
totally. But he's not. He does have cognitive issues, and so he does have to have help still. But he can work, he can meet people, and he's still a delight. He worked at a local grocery store for 12 years, and before he went back to stay with Catherine's sister in Rochester, New York. But that store, he's been gone from there for 2 years, and there are still people asking us, where is Thano? We miss Thano at the store, and even go into the store, and they miss him. So he made quite an impact, a positive impact in that store. So
Yeah.
he's doing okay.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
So
I'm inclined to believe that ministry comes in a lot of different
Yes, it
packages.
does.
Yes, it does.
It's not just a rote, rigid assignment that you're stuck in this ministry slot, and that's the way it is. But I think even ministry has flowed out of our experience with this brain injury syndrome. And Becky, for example, works with the Brain Injury Alliance of Oregon. And I think when I hear her talking on the phone, I get kind of blessed in a way because I recognize that there's a form of ministry being
Absolutely.
transacted right there in some of those phone calls.
Yeah.
Just offering, a biblical principle is that we encourage and comfort others with the same comfort wherewith we ourselves have been comforted.
Right.
And I see that playing out. So
Yeah.
a lot of things we think are bummers, big bad bummers, but God has ways of turning it into,
yes,
A positive.
into good.
blessings.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we say that on this show quite a bit too, you are called, no matter who you are or where you are in life, you're called, and God will use you no matter how young or old you are. You're never useless.
That's
ever.
it. That's it.
Well, that's a good thing because I'm sure getting old. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, but you're still up for adventure after this last few days of traveling all the way from Oregon
I know.
with 2 dogs just to bring a piano to your granddaughter.
Okay.
What an adventure that was.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah,
And then
kinda,
the
sorta.
odometer going out and an oil leak.
And the passenger door locked so you can't get in or
Oh,
out.
yeah. We've had some fun with that. Becky has to climb in and out from the driver's side. Oh, boy.
Oh, bless your
Yeah.
heart.
Good thing she's an athlete.
Right. It's all that
That's what keeps her
water,
young, huh?
water aerobics is helping her out.
It is.
Climbing in and out. Tell us, though, too, about. I have lots of memories when we were in the Solomon Islands, mostly because that's
I'm sure you do.
the bulk of where I grew up. Because I think we left there when I was
Well, I don't know if
6.
you remember, Katherine, but you were also born there.
Oh.
You don't remember that, do you?
I don't remember that part. I remember a lot of other things, though.
Yeah.
Brings up an interesting thought, though. I mean, we as in the States are very accustomed to having all of these things at our
Fingertips.
yeah. What is it like, Becky, to be away from your homeland in another culture giving birth? That's one of the things I think all moms want to make sure they got everything
Yeah,
they need.
That's true. They do.
I mean, that's the one thing they don't want to risk anything.
Yeah.
Well,
How-
and
how
she
was
had
that?
she had 2 children overseas. She had my brother in the Marshalls, and then she had me in the Solomon Islands. So she did it twice. And so many missionary wives would go to Australia or
even come back to the States. Yeah,
just to
'cause
have
they-
their babies because,
Right.
like you said, why
You don't want to
there's
risk that one.
complications and so
So what was that like?
Well, actually the Marshalls was in some ways more primitive than even the Solomons, and so it was quite interesting with her brother when I had him, and when I was telling a nurse friend about it, she was just so incensed because because things started on Wednesday, and I think even in the morning, and then I went in on Thursday to see the doctor, and actually the doctor he was a surgeon. He
wasn't an OB?
he wasn't in yeah. And then he said he went in a medical book he had, and he said, well, when this happens, then it's only 2% that go on farther without things really happening. And he said, so you can come in, things should happen. So he wasn't too worried. Well, then by Saturday, nothing had happened more. And then he said, I saw him at the airport because we were seeing some helpers leave. And he said, and I was feeling really bad, really rotten,
Yeah.
And I was starting to hurt under my arm, which meant infection.
Uh-oh.
And so he said, well, if nothing has happened by tomorrow morning, Sunday morning, he says, you come in and I will induce you. Well, Ray and I went home and we just took hands and we prayed because I didn't want to be induced. And so Ray used the scripture that said, be anxious for nothing, but in all things with prayer and thanksgiving, make your requests known unto the Lord. And so we requested that it would be a natural birth. And so it was just within about less than 2 hours, things started happening and moving. And so we had to rush into the hospital. We didn't know how long it would take or anything. The poor doctor, he was kind of, he was on call, and about little after midnight, he says, you know what, I think I'm just going to go home. And he hadn't even gotten home or hadn't left the hospital, and things really started happening.
Wow.
So anyway, God answered that prayer, but with Katherine, it was a better situation. The doctor wasn't there. It was a midwife. And so that was interesting too. But the doctor told me, he says, keep walking. He said, and then we won't have complications. And so I walked a lot until I could walk no more. But anyway, that was better. And actually, we had felt, even before the births, that if there was anything those people knew how to do in the medical field, was deliver babies, because they had a lot of babies.
Yeah,
It was, and so we figured, why do we have to go someplace else, and there was a doctor available. So we thought, we won't do that. We'll just trust the Lord and trust in what is here, because they know how to do it. So that was our attitude.
Did you see my hand up?
I did.
Like kids in a classroom, my hand's up. Like, can I say something, teacher? Anyway, I have to say I'm a pretty blessed old geezer. Very fortunate to be able to grow old with my college sweetheart.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got 56 plus years going in this relationship. I'm so thankful, and I believe that God kind of works on grooming and programming his kids that he uses in ministry and in the harvest. And I'm thankful for how he has worked on this lady. She's pretty low key, easy to get along with. And I think, but Nita, you asked what's it like to be able to cope with these things in a foreign environment, cross-culturally. And I think that God has kind of groomed her to be very relaxed. And I see this so much in our own culture. People are just freaky.
Yeah.
They get reactionary to all and scared and afraid of this and that. Well, she's been pretty
chill.
Pretty calm. You say chilled, I guess?
Yeah, pretty chill.
Oh.
That's a word that a lot of people use
Yeah.
in this day and age to a degree. I mean, Kate knows what that means. It's like you just kind of go with the flow and you're relaxed about everything.
Well,
Or calm.
that's a pretty good description of Becky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will
She
say,
even went with me all these years. Good night.
Yeah, and we all know. So we always tease that Dad has wore out more guardian angels than anybody else we know. And when they get Sperry duty, they're like, "No, take me out, take me out."
Okay.
I will enter a little caveat here. When I was in the hospital to have our first son, Ray had to kick a dog out from under the bed.
Oh, wow.
So that tells you how primitive the hospital was.
Oh,
Yeah.
my goodness.
And the
Mangy
marshals.
dog.
Yeah, mangy dog. They would come in there and
That's crazy.
yeah, it was crazy.
That would not fly too well over here, would it?
No, I don't think so.
Not very
It's
well.
hard to get therapy dogs in a hospital now, and that was definitely wasn't a therapy dog.
Yeah, true.
Well, speaking of medical stuff, though, that was a challenge throughout all of our ministries because
Yes, it was.
we obviously kids get sick. Obviously, there's infections and so many different things like that. We dealt with malaria. What was that like with having to basically rely only on God for healing? / we did have some good medical care because we did have a bunch of people from Australia and New Zealand in a hospital up the road for part of it when we were in the Solomons, but still, you still have to trust so much that God's going to see you through. What was it like making those medical decisions of when should we take the kid to the hospital or what should
Yeah,
we
that's
do?
a good question. How did you know when it was time to take greater action than just at home?
Several incidents, I guess, are coming to mind, but I know I have to cut. I can't take time for all of them, but I do remember really relying on the Lord so much, for this, that He was in this, and if we didn't have Him, it didn't matter anyway. And Katherine did break her arm while we were out there. Her brother was naughty and said, "Let go of the branch of the tree." And so she did and fell and broke her arm.
Broke my arm.
And so that was rather apparent. But later on, when she was a teenager, she did get a real bad case of cerebral malaria. And we took her to the hospital. She was dehydrated and things like that. And vomiting, she couldn't keep anything down. And so she had to go on the IV drip to rehydrate her. And then because she was vomiting, the doctor gave her anti-vomit medicine, and she reacted to that. And at that point, the doctor's house was close by, and his wife was a nurse. I don't know if the hospital was full. I don't remember.
I think it was full.
I think it was full, and they were such good people, and they had us come, Katherine and me, come and stay in their house, and they made a special bed for her there. Well, I tell you, that was scary. That was really scary, because when she went into the reaction of that medicine, it was like her eyes started rolling back and she just followed them and went like that. And she was just
Convulsing.
And
It's like
of
a
course it's
seizure.
scary. And of course, even his wife, the nurse, she ran to get her husband,
Right.
and because she knew something was really wrong, and he kind of downplayed it, but then she did it again, and so he saw, and so he went and got an antitoxin to then help her, And then when she was able to go home, she was hallucinating, and she thought big mosquitoes were trying to get her, and she was, going for those mosquitoes and just trying, and she did it for hours and hours and hours, and it took Ray and I both time to, to keep her and to help her. And I was getting so tired because I had the other kids too to take care of and all that. And I said, "Lord, if you don't heal her and you want her to be like this for her the rest of her life and us to deal with it, I will do it. But I really don't want to. Then Ray stayed with her through the night because she was doing it just constant. But God did finally heal her and took that hallucination stuff away from her. But sometimes we have to give up. We have to lay it all on the altar and say, God, whatever you want, I'm willing to walk that path.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then he doesn't always keep us on that path. He will perform the miracle that we need. And he says, no, I was testing you. I wanted you to give me your all again. And,
Right.
we can give our all when we're young or at this stage or at this stage, but he wants our all the time.
Yeah, he wants our yes.
He does. He does.
I think we can't talk about these things. I mean, what it's like to be human beings in the context of an unfriendly world
Of course.
without having some anxieties. And I don't know, the thing that is so calming, I think it's helpful to lace our theology into this whole equation.
Yes.
Because we're always having to hammer out the details of our faith in practical terms. And I don't know if anything is more stabilizing for me is to embrace our biblical theology that says our God is very big,
Yes.
Yes.
blindsided by nothing.
Right.
Besides that, he knows everything about everything.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you pass up a better deal, an arrangement for doing life than having this relationship with an almighty God? I mean, wow. Anyway, that strips a lot of the trauma and fear out of this sojourn. So the joy of the Lord is our strength,
Right.
and that can transcend the bummers. Yeah.
Walking through the valley of the shadow,
Mm.
you know, he'll walk through it with you and get you to the other side. And that's hard to remember sometimes, especially when you're in the midst of the storm.
I remember one time, too, Katherine just was tiny, and Ray was gone to another island. And I was supposed to speak at a church a ways away. And I hadn't really had time to study and decide what I was going to say or anything. And she was so fussy. She just wanted mommy, and I can't remember if she even might have had a bit of fever. And so the scripture came to mind, cast your care upon him, for he careth for you. And the devil is walking around seeking whom he may devour and that. And so I just said, devil, you know I have to speak in the morning. You know I have not had time to prepare. And so you get out of here and you leave my child alone because I have work to do for the Lord. And she calmed down, and I was able to prepare, and I was able to speak the next day. So, I mean, just to me, that was practical. It was applying my faith and what I knew of the word in a situation, because when you have a fussy child,
Yeah.
you
Right.
can't do anything.
No,
you
you
know,
can't.
and you're,
Your brain is very
and
distracted.
my husband wasn't there to help or anything. So anyway, that was just another incident. Where
I can't believe all the trouble you've caused.
I know.
I know, it's been terrible.
No,
Caused
she's been
lot
a
of
delight.
problems.
I can attest she's made up for it. I want to ask you guys, just for fun, you guys have some pretty unique nicknames that have been tagged on you the last few couple of years. Can I share those?
Yeah.
Well, I know that they've always called Ray Papa Tua, now, and then they call Becky, the grandkids, I'm talking about Catherine's kids, and they call her Mama Ducky. So bring us to date on what those are about, what they mean. I love names, that's why I'm asking.
Well, Tua was a word that they called grandfathers in the Roviana language in the Solomon Islands. And so we chose Tua for him just because it was easy, and Catherine's kids added the Papa in front, but other grandkids just call him Tua.
But they're so
And-
used to calling Tom Papa,
Right.
so
Yeah,
then they
that's it.
thought that was what they were supposed to do. So
Right.
then they just added it Papa
Right.
Tua.
So it's a
to it.
blending of two
Yes.
different
Friendly-
cultures.
Two different,
Yes.
Yeah.
two, and grandkids.
Yeah.
I guess this is another little evidence of language evolution.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
How
Right,
words
right.
and
Yeah.
phrases develop and their special meaning.
And then our oldest daughter came out. She was in a bad situation, and she came out to the Solomon Islands and had her daughter. Well, so in the household, there was me that the kids were calling Mama, and but we wanted her to recognize her mom as Mom, and so she would call her mother, of course, Mom, and then everybody else would call me Mama Becky, so that there was a distinction. And so I became Mama Becky. And but then Becca, when she came, she has some little language issues in a way.
That's
And-
Catherine's daughter.
Yeah,
Catherine's
my
daughter.
third daughter. She
And-
has kind of a speech impediment and pronouncing certain words and stuff.
Yeah,
So,
so-
Named after you as well as
yes.
Yeah, right. And so she couldn't say Becky right, so it came out Mama Ducky.
I love
And
it so,
so
much,
that's
though.
so that was her corruption of what I'm called.
I think it's an enhancement, and I would not change that to save my life. I love Papa Tua, Mama Ducky. I just love it. I really do. Those are so much fun names. Those
Yeah.
are different. They're unique, and they're uniquely you.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
Nobody
it.
else. Nobody else. Just
No,
you two.
Yeah, yeah. So
love it.
that's how we got our names.
Grandparents' names. But yeah, Rebecca is named after mom and dad, actually, because she's Rebecca Ray.
Poor kid. No,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
She has a lot to live up to. No.
She's on her way.
Well, I find
feisty.
your testimony and all of what you have to share very inspiring in a very rich and unique way. And I am always enjoy listening to you guys tell
Well,
the
thank you.
stories and sharing your experiences as missionaries, things we take for granted. It always reminds me of the sacrifices that are made across the seas, lifetime sacrifices, raising your family in a different culture. I mean, everything. Little things we take for granted are not there. So kudos to you guys for taking the gospel to the Solomon Island. You guys were involved in church planting. Do you just roughly, how many churches did you guys help initiate plant?
Well, I think more it was church building.
So you came alongside.
And but we did
village
plant
church
some
supporting.
village supporting.
You
Yeah,
know, just supporting
So-
the.
something that had already started, you just come in as reinforcement to
Right.
help
Yeah.
get it on the ground.
Yeah, often missionaries will go in from friends, like in the Philippines. They would go in and they would build a building for the people. Well, then the people didn't think it was their church because the missionary did it all. And so if something went wrong, it would needed a new roof or something, well, it's the missionary's church, he should do it. But Ray became interested in doing sawmilling. And in the Solomons especially, well, in Vanuatu, they have beautiful hardwood trees.
Yes.
And they would sometimes just cut them down to make their gardens. And then they would burn them up.
Oh, wow.
You know, they had no use for them, no way to do anything with them, so they'd burn them up. So Ray found out about a nice portable sawmill, and so he would have the local people, if it belonged to somebody else, negotiate for those trees. And then he would use the sawmill, and they would help him to mill up the timbers, and he is very good at construction and
building
engineering. And so he would figure out what he needed for the posts and everything and build it. I don't know, do you do pole barns around here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so it would be maybe more of a pole barn style, don't you think, Ray?
Yeah.
And then he'd encourage them to buy the sheet metal for the roofing. and they would help build it, and so it was their church.
That's
Yeah.
a spin I've not heard before, but that's very interesting to involve them, because I always thought you just go there and you make it happen for them. I've never heard that the reason you involve them is not just because of the gospel's sake, but so that they will take ownership of
Yes.
what you've done. That's
Right.
very, very,
Right.
very
And
cool.
so that was a very good thing for the villagers. And when we went back in 2017 to Vanuatu, one church he had built, and they had filled in the sides and everything, and put a door on. But they were so proud of that church that they still had their church that he had helped
Oh, that's
start,
great.
helped with the building, and they had milled the timber and everything. So it was neat to see that. It needed some repairs, but it was good to see they were still using that church and proud of it. So,
Still reaching their community.
Yeah,
Other people coming
right.
in to help.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Yeah, and then you had a chance to go back to the Solomon Islands too when you went missions trip and everything, and then visit there. And a lot of the people that are in pastoral ministry and the leadership of the churches there, a lot of them had gone to your Bible school.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're still carrying that on. What was that like, seeing and reconnecting with some of your old friends and people you had mentored?
Can I ask a question before you answer that?
Yeah.
So are you telling me that they actually have built a Bible school over there?
They had built
we
a
did
Bible
when
school,
we first went to the
yes.
Solomons.
And
Yeah.
that Bible school is still there, still mentoring people for the gospel right now.
It has changed.
But it's still
the
active.
actual one, that we started, and then somebody came.
But the
behind, but
people
still, the
that
people-
attended and graduated from the Bible school that they taught at and they had done are now the leadership.
That's what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
though. You're talking about these people that you mentored, and
Mm-hmm,
you built this Bible school that is still actively preaching the gospel.
Yes,
and
they
will live
are.
on way beyond you.
Well, you might
How does that feel?
maybe it's more accurate to say that the investment in that early Bible
Yes.
school is ongoing because
Yes.
they have formulated their own Bible school program.
Right.
It's not the same one, but
That's okay.
I guess the seeds planted keep growing. So
Absolutely.
that's kind of a neat phenomenon to behold.
Yeah, but it's still moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's how you know if it's a God thing, is it keeps continuing forward. So you guys were there as the foundational builders, but other people came in and added the... So that's cool to be involved in that. What was that like? On an everyday basis? Did you start with just people, or did you actually build?
Well, they had started work there, but we were actually the first American resident missionaries in the Solomon Islands.
Wow.
And
With our fellowship.
Yeah, with our fellowship. So whatever happened, we did it.
That's
But
great.
the people wanted a Bible school,
I
and
love
so we started the Bible school. I used to get kind of intimidated or uncomfortable or something when people would say, "What is the typical day like in your life on the mission field?"
Oh,
Yeah.
it's like,
Like you get up, you do the,
yeah,
no 2 days are the same.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, we can relate to that.
We get up and then
You
this
get
is
up
what
and
we
you
do,
react.
and that's how we found out what we're doing, because we're doing it. And that's how you know.
Yeah, yeah, and you have you just have to meet things as they come up, and so there was really not too many typical days. So
That's what pioneers do. You guys are,
But
it's a blessing
anyway.
to know you guys. What a legacy. What a wonderful legacy.
yeah, it was kind of neat too. I will say, a few years ago, after we'd been in Vanuatu, I had started a Bible club on Fridays after school.
For kids,
For
right?
kids, yeah, for kids. And so we'd have them out on our front veranda and stuff and do whatever. So, of course, that was many years ago. But it was kind of neat to, and, social media does have a good place sometimes. But a young man contacted me through Facebook, and he has since become a doctor. He thanked me for doing that, having that, because it had helped him
Oh, wow.
in his life, and he was still, using that in his life. And so, you do find out sometimes later that the seeds you planted, and not just like in the Bible school, I mean, you see
Right.
that, but to have an individual,
Yeah.
say, I was in your Bible club,
That's
and
cool.
that has helped me
As a little boy.
as a little boy.
As a little island boy.
Uh-huh. To help them in their life. And it's really rewarding. It's a blessing. And, if it is God, it bears fruit. He's the Lord of the harvest. We aren't. We just
Right.
have to be faithful.
For the workers.
You just have to give your yes.
Yes,
And
have
we
to
say
give your
that
yes.
a lot on the
That's
show
true.
too, is you have to give your yes. Do it
Do.
afraid.
Yeah.
God will see you through.
Well, since we're being kind of ad lib here and we don't have a script to follow, maybe I'll just throw in something about sideline to this whole enterprise of mission work.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I've had more fun than I deserve in the process. It's just I've enjoyed the cross-cultural experience. I enjoy the language. I enjoy just learning about how other people groups live and think and what they eat. And I made a determination before we ever entered this. I'm quite aware that a lot of Americans are pretty picky-uni about what they eat, and
Yes,
I made
very.
an early decision that whatever they eat, I'm going to eat, and I'm going to like it. So I've had a lot of fun eating, even in that regard. But I grew up in Seattle. I started spearfishing in Puget Sound when I was about 14, and I read stuff about Jacques Cousteau and all his diving adventures, and I dreamt someday of diving in the tropics. Oh man, have I ever been able to fulfill that dream. And in fact, I had a lot of fun turning the cultural tables.
Yeah.
When we were in the Marshalls, I don't want to boast, but I developed spearfishing to a pretty good level.
Right.
That was fairly competent at it, which made me almost a superstar in the context of the Solomon Islands, where they're not as, shall we say, they haven't had the opportunity with the equipment and the environment to be as refined. A lot of the islanders in the Solomons were still wearing using the little Chinese store goggles.
Yeah. And they wouldn't fit. They were hard plastic and they had a piece of glass in them. So they wouldn't even totally suction cup to your eyes.
Yeah.
So you'd get leaking in there and they were really not very good.
If we were going to be typical about this missionary and local people group relationship, it's probably more typical for the local people to be the fishing people that give fish to the missionary.
Missionary.
And that's
Take
a
care of
wonderful,
them.
we've been on the receiving end of that. And that's been a wonderful relationship. But I had a lot of fun being a missionary that gave fish to the locals.
Yeah.
And I won a lot of points on islands where you might go through the protocol of the culture society, island society there, and give fish to the chief of the
that's
village
super
or the
cool.
island. And that's just been a lot of fun.
Yeah. They used to
great.
call Dad the crazy white missionary. Because he would do things, though, too, that they would never do or wouldn't try to even spear certain fish or things like that. But Dad would do it. And then, like he said, he'd bring it to the chief or whatever to pay compliment and be a good person that's coming into their village. Because, again, then that did open the door, too, to then spread the gospel, because then they're more receptive to somebody giving them a gift that says, hey, I respect you as the chief of this village, and so I'm giving you the fish. So, a cool thing.
Especially in the Marshalls, actually, it was even more practical than that, in that sometimes the ship didn't come in like it was supposed to, and it would be you know, more, maybe 2 months. In the Marshalls, they couldn't raise much. And so if we didn't have that fish that he and some of the students would go out and get, we wouldn't have had anything to eat. Fish was a mainstay for us.
Yeah.
And so he fed the high school Bible school we were involved in. We and the students, benefited from his developing spearfishing and bringing the fish in. So that was a real physical blessing.
The Marshallese spear fishermen, though, were very good. They were very good at harvesting the bounty of the ocean.
They were, yeah. And just one fun story. I was left on all the missionaries on Majuro, where we lived, and that were involved in the school and stuff, went to another island for language school to learn Marshallese, and Ray went with them, and the missionary in charge did not want any kids there, and partly, if I can be so bold, it was because the two older missionary kids from another family knew Marshallese better than that missionary.
Oh, so he didn't want them to correct.
No, so those two were not wanted. So I was left because I had a young child, and so then I oversaw those.
So you were
two
the
kids.
designated
I was
babysitter.
the designated babysitter, and and then the day they were coming back from the School of Language, there were some people that came onto it was a family, the mother and father and 3 children that came onto the campus. And so I'm like, who are these people? But they were other missionaries on their way to I think, Malaysia or Singapore.
Just a layover on the...
Just a layover, yeah. And they knew the Bible school, high school was there, so they came to see it and everything. So that night, I fixed lobster for 27 people.
Wow.
Oh,
So anyway, that's one of my
lobster.
My
that's a lot of lobster.
claim to fame.
That's a lot of lobster.
It was fun.
Now, where did the lobster come from? I mean,
Well, you and some of the students
did you have it in the freezer?
Yeah,
Okay.
had picked them up and stuff, and they were in the freezer. When you speared fish, you would sometimes bring lobster, and they were in the freezer. So
Wish we could just jump in the nearby river here and get some lobster.
Yeah,
Wouldn't
I
that
know,
be cool,
right?
Catherine?
Yeah, being landlocked has its
drawbacks.
Kind of
Drawbacks.
crawdads.
yeah.
I mean, you'd have to catch a lot of them to make one lobster.
Right.
Yeah, we
They're
used to do
there.
that
You
too.
look for them.
They are there. Absolutely, they are there. Well, that's about all the time we have for this week's episode, but we will be bringing my mom and dad back to finish this conversation and talk about more of their experiences and what God did through them in the islands and just some fun stories that are encouraging. So join us again next week. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next week in the Simply His Coffee Shop.